Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the West Suffolk series, 103 parishes set in some of the most beautiful English countryside, and there's some good ones in this area. Shall we go have a look? Of course. Welcome back to West Suffolk, everybody. Now, this episode has begun in a very weird way, and you'll see why at the very beginning after I've done this little intro. Basically, I had to do a little detour, and you'll see what the reason was for it. It was not very pleasant, to be honest with you. Anyway, where are we? We're in a place that I'm not terribly sure how to pronounce yet. I don't know whether it's Moulton or Molton. I've heard both, so who knows? That's where we are. Welcome to the parish of Moulton/Molton. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like, and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Moulton Mule Farm. Here we go then for the 8th and last time in this first run of West Suffolk parishes, and boy, have I saved the best until last. Welcome to Moulton, and yes, that is how to pronounce it, because it derives from the word mule. This was literally a mule farm, or a place where mules were kept. If there are any mules here these days though, well, they pale in comparison to Moulton's history with horses. As we've learned over the past few episodes, this area is all about horse racing, breeding and training, and Moulton is no exception. This is where you'll find Molton Paddocks, or Fidget Hall as it was originally known locally. It's a racing stable operated by Godolphin, and it's said to have the capacity for around 200 horses, many of which are extremely high quality. Molton Paddocks isn't the only horse-related feature here though. Centuries before the first horse ever graced Newmarket Racecourse, Moulton was providing pack horses with a route across the River Kennet, which flows through the village, dividing it into two pieces. This was done via the Pack Horse Bridge, the only one of its kind remaining anywhere in Suffolk now, after the remains of the one at Kentford were washed away. Come with me to check it out as we explore another equine-themed village in the heart of East Anglia. Now, before we start walking, I need to show you how this episode originally began. The drive-in you've just seen was supposed to look a little different. Moulton has two fords where the River Kennet crosses a pair of local roads. The idea was to drive through one of the fords on Bridge Street, but as you can see, after all the rain in this area of late, this would not have been a very good idea. Oh dear. Hopefully there's a way round. With the first ford completely impassable to the average humble hatchback like mine, I opted to attempt the other ford instead, the one that's close to the church. However, it was the same story there as well. The road was submerged way beyond the point where it would kill the car. Luckily though, there is a third way to cross the Kennet in Moulton. Right next to the second ford is a bridge, but it's a weak one with a maximum weight limit of 3 tons. It's also really narrow, so trust me when I tell you, I had my heart in my mouth when I crossed it. Flooding is something the River Kennet has done to Moulton for years, but it's been a while since it was disastrous. I met one local man on my walk who told me about the floods in 1968, when he witnessed a man row a boat over the village green. As we go around the route, we'll learn a bit more about why the Kennet is so high. Let's start with Moulton Paddocks. This is of course inaccessible to a guy like me with a camera, so here's a greatly extended special section about the place. Moulton Paddocks is a racing stable operated by Godolphin. It can cater for around 200 high quality horses, and it's currently run by this man, Charlie Appleby. In 1841, Fidget Hall, as it was originally known, commanded 64 acres of land, and it was all owned by George Samuel Ford. He was known in the racing fraternity as Lawyer Ford. Ford was passionately fond of racing. His horse Poison won the 1843 Oaks, and Gratcha won the Coronation Stakes in 1846. In 1842, William Webber, surgeon and founder of the Norwich Royal Free Hospital for Incurables, became owner of Fidget Hall. He carried out extensive building work on the property and increased the size of the estate to 313 acres. During this period, the name changed to Molton Paddocks. He would breed racehorses here. William Franklin, the nephew of the explorer John, then purchased Moulton Paddocks from Webber in 1857, but he would sell up in 1859. From the early 1860s, Moulton Paddocks belonged to the Fryer family. They more than doubled the area of land and improved the house before selling to Lord Gerard in 1885. Gerard sold Moulton Paddocks to George Alexander Baird in 1892, who moved his stud from Kentford. Lily Langtry, the actress who we mentioned in that episode, was in a relationship with Baird at the time. Langtry had a small number of horses in training at Baird's stable, and after his death moved them to Kentford. In 1899, Ernest Castle took ownership. He was financial advisor to the Prince of Wales in 1897, and the two developed a close friendship. The Prince was persuaded by his racing manager to move his horses from John Porter's stable at King's Clare to those of Richard Marsh at Newmarket. This arrangement was convenient for Sandringham House, and when Castle purchased Moulton Paddocks, the Prince became a frequent visitor. By the time of Castle's death in 1921, Moulton Paddocks had been expanded to over 1,300 acres. Solly Joel became the paddock's owner in 1922. He already had a well-established stud near Reading in Berkshire, but he used Moulton Paddocks to train under Walter Earl. When Joel died in 1931, the estate passed to his son Dudley. After his death in 1941, the house fell into disrepair and it was demolished by 1950. The paddocks, though, are still going. They act as Godolphin's summer base with facilities including stables, an equine swimming pool, hydrotherapy rooms, hostel, and even a prayer hall. Godolphin are the world's largest thoroughbred horse racing and breeding team, which was named in honour of the Godolphin Arabian. It was founded by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum and spans 4 continents, from its home in Dubai to Europe, Australia, Japan, and America. We begin our main walk on Newmarket Road at a former Wesleyan chapel which was erected in 1912. Moulton has had at least 3 chapels in its time. The first one, built in 1828, was a small independent effort close to the Packhorse Bridge, which has now been converted into cottages. Now, I know we're in Suffolk, but this here is Chippenham Road. Fear not, you haven't been magically transported into Wiltshire. There is a Chippenham village away to the northwest. Let's follow this road for a short way north and see where it goes. Here's a thatched property, and believe me, that's not the only one you're going to be seeing on this walk. Moulton is full of them. If you were to continue up Chippenham Road here, you get to the local primary school where the road forks into 2. That's a long way away, so it'll be caught later using the car. Instead, we're off down Benfield Road and Tweed Close. The latter of the two remembers several Moulton residents with that surname, including a former rector, Chris Tweed, who was once the chairman of the parish council. On Bridge Street now, this is the Packhorse Inn, named for the Packhorse Bridge, which stands close by. It was until 2013 called the King's Head, but it was changed after it came into new ownership. One of its former landladies was a Mrs. Tweed, another local remembered by the street name. Now, if Nicky had been with me here, the words chocolate box would have been out in force. Close to the pub we have Bridge Farm, that's the yellow house with a thatched roof, and number 7 Bridge Street, also thatched but coloured pink. Both are Grade 2 listed buildings. All of these buildings are close to the immaculate village green, which occupies a patch of land alongside the River Kennet. The green features a water pump located right next to the river. This is actually a replica, but it stands on the exact spot where a real pump did until the 1960s. Being so close to the river, in times of flood, the green often becomes submerged. Otherwise, it's a pretty spot right in the heart of the Moulton Conservation Area. It's overlooked by an old bakehouse, one of several former trades and industries along Bridge Street. Now we come to Moulton's most well-known landmark, the Packhorse Bridge itself. This is now the only remaining bridge of its type in Suffolk, but it's almost identical to the one that once stood in Kentford. It's believed to have been built in either the 14th or the 15th century. Its purpose was simple: to carry horses across the Kennet as they travelled between Cambridge and Bury St Edmunds with goods like fish, poultry, cloth and hops. It protected them from any potential damage water may cause by fording the river instead. Given how swollen the river was at this point, it meant the only way over the Kennet was to walk over the bridge. The original plan was to walk through the ford, but as we already know, that was not a good idea. From up here you can see just how deep the water was. Normally, the river only flows primarily through one of the bridge's 4 pointed arches. At the time of filming, water was running through all 4. The bridge is made of a mixture of flint and stone, and despite the hammer it must have taken over the centuries, it's almost fully intact. Okay, so we know from the intro that this is deep, but you can't really see how deep it is when you're in the car, so I made the right decision in not trying to go through this water. From on top of the bridge you can actually see how deep it is. You can see the road slope down into the water. Now I've got my wellies on here, so I'm going to wade into it a little bit and show you exactly how deep this is. I'm not going to go all the way in because, you know, I don't want to get wet legs, but you can see, look at this, how deep this is. I can go a bit further, but I'm not going to go much further than about there, you see, and I'm not even halfway into it. So I definitely made the right choice in not trying to drive through this ford. Obviously there's another ford which you also saw at the beginning. We'll check that out later because we'll need to cross the little bridge on the way back from the church. And speaking of the church, that's where we're heading now, this way. Now we're making our way to the church. You can do so by using Brookside, but I opted for a more unconventional route, first passing a farm on Gaisley Road before the site of a steel fabrication company on the opposite side. What we're doing here is following a footpath that climbs the steepish side of the Kennet Valley. The view this gives you in places over the village is magnificent. You have to pass through some private property on this path too. This blue house is one of the properties in question. I made sure to stick to the path at all times. Molton's Church is dedicated to St Peter. Restored in 1851, this is a Grade 1 listed building. It's Norman in origin, but there may well have been a Saxon church on this very site before those times. It features an early 14th century tower topped with a gilded weather vane in the shape of a large pike, created by the blacksmith Charles Poulter. Its impressive situation is in itself a noteworthy feature, standing on the side of a beach-crowned hill with the lofty and elegant proportions of its embattled flint walls adding to its beauty. Regular viewers, last week you saw the parish of Normanton-on-Soar, which is in Rushcliffe, and you remember how when I was in the churchyard I had to be very careful because there was a funeral going on. Well, who would have thought lightning would strike twice in 2 weeks? Another one going on right there. So I couldn't record everything I wanted to. The church was actually going to be open, but obviously I can't go in when there's a funeral on. There's a war memorial in the grounds, but the hearse was parked very close to it, so no way on earth I was going to be recording that. But there is a war memorial in the grounds of the churchyard. So now we've come to the river again. After exiting the churchyard, we're going to cross the bridge, which is near the second of the 2 fords, and complete the circuit now of the village. So this is Brookside, where there are several listed buildings like an old schoolhouse and a building called the Priory, the former rectory, which stands on the site of an ancient religious house. It's called Brookside for an obvious reason, despite the fact this is a river. Centuries back, it was probably a lot less river-like. This is the Week Bridge which I drove over earlier, and it's the only one of the 3 along the Kennet that can accommodate vehicles, as long as they're not any heavier than 3 tons, that is. Here's a fellow driver making use of the crossing. As well as the bridge we've just crossed, there's a footbridge downstream made of stone and flint rubble. That's late medieval, and it's known as the School Bridge owing to its location. Next we follow Church Road, and at the end of this we come to perhaps the prettiest 3 buildings yet, numbers 2, 4 and 6, which are all thatched cottages. Number 6 was my favourite of the 3, simply for its deep peach colour. That's taking nothing away from 2 and 4 though. All 3 are listed buildings, and so too is the School Bridge. Rightly so. The grand red brick house facing us now is Moulton Hall. It's mid-18th century originally, although it's been vastly altered since. The house has only been known as Moulton Hall since the 20th century. There was an earlier Moulton Hall that preceded this that stood 100 metres to the southeast. If you look to the right afterwards, you'll see a huge area of grazing meadows, and in the far distance you can just make out the old schoolhouse. These meadows were once part of French Hall Manor and were enclosed and amalgamated into a parkland pasture. All the buildings we're looking at now are or were part of French Hall too. It was a sub-manor which passed through the hands of several families, including the de Agnellis, the Talmacs, the Stayfords, and most notably the Afflecks in the 18th century. They are heavily associated with nearby Dalham. By the end of the 18th century, the Duke of Rutland owned 45 properties within the French Hall Manor estate. One house here had some weather charts outside it. They show local rainfall data, which explains why the Kennet is continually high. Next we pass another thatched house, number 20 the street. This one isn't listed though, oddly. Not far down the road is the village shop. This has been here since Victorian times, and it became the post office in around 1900. It's still thriving as much today as it was over 100 years ago. Over the road is a phone box and a gate which leads into a field. That's no ordinary field though, that's the main recreational space here in Moulton, which offers football pitches and an extensive playground for all the youngsters. It's all located next to the village hall. The village hall stands on the site of the barns and yards of the former Trinity Hall farm, which was destroyed by a fire in the 1840s. Numbers 3 and 5 the street occupy the site of the farmhouse. This is Moulton's 3rd village hall. One of its predecessors was an old army hut given to the village by Sir Ernest Castle. The modern hall has the parish notice board. I was beginning to wonder if there was actually one anywhere at this point. Mark it off, folks. My last act was to emerge back onto Bridge Street, which brings the route to a close. Okay, we're all the way around the village, and I'm perched here on a bench at the corner of Bridge Street, Newmarket Road and Chippenham Road, and it's a wobbly bench as well. See how it's wobbling behind me? It's not very sturdy. It's carved out of a piece of probably oak tree, I would say, a trunk of an oak tree. He's sort of tying back to the wall or something, because otherwise it's going to fall over. Either that or I'm just too heavy after Christmas, who knows. Anyway, there's one more thing I want to do in this episode, and it involves driving. So if I turn the camera around here, you can see Chippenham Road. Now of course we haven't covered the school yet because it's up there at a junction, so we're going to catch that on our way towards Kentford again, because you might remember the Kentford episode, and I mentioned at the end of it that there's a bit of land in that one that used to belong to this parish, but it actually belongs to Kentford now after a boundary change. So we're going to drive up through that and show you that to finish this off, and that finishes this little run in West Suffolk as well. 8 villages, all very unique in their own little way, and all beautiful, all fantastically beautiful. Can't wait to come back to this area and do some more. Did you spot the school there? Blink and you'll have missed it. It's not the biggest in the world, but Molton C is the only school around for a few miles. It replaced the old school on Brookside. It's a vitally important amenity too. Children from the likes of Gaisley and Kentford attend it, as well as those from Moulton, owing to there being no schools in either of those places. Now this next area should look very familiar to you if you've been watching the whole series. We're back in Kentford on the B1506, which is the former turnpike road between Bury St Edmunds and Newmarket. What I'm about to show you is all these days within Kentford Parish, but it used to be in Moulton until a boundary change switched it between parishes. This is the Landwade Business Park, perhaps one of the most unusual industrial estates you'll have ever seen. This is where I'm hoping for a bit of help from the locals. Try as I might, I couldn't pin down what these wooden huts would have originally been. They all look military, and that would make a lot of sense. Remember, Thurlow Nuns Standen in Kentford stands on the site of a World War II army depot. Perhaps these buildings were all once a part of it, because they're literally just on the other side of the B1085. I'd love some more information on this, so let me know in the comments if my hunch is right. After doing this for more than 3 years now, experience counts for a lot. Next, it's a new build estate. Note the name of this next street, Larnock Drive. It's named after James Larnock, who owned the winner of the 1898 Derby, Jeddah. Jeddah's grave is hidden within the woodlands close by. A picture of the grave is on your screen now. Larnock laid the gravestone himself. There's a street close by called Jeddah Way, which you can see from the end of Larnock Drive. It features the Kentford Manor Care Home, which is the big building you can see through the trees. The home is owned by WT UK Opco 4 Limited, and it's managed and staffed by Care UK. James Larnock was a gambler. He won over £5,000 after placing a bet on Jeddah to win the Derby. He used his winnings to construct Landwade's Hall, which was completed in 1907. The house is now used as administrative offices and a luxury wedding venue by the Animal Health Trust, the respected world-famous charity who's owned the site since 1948. I can't show you the hall itself, but I can show you the John McDougall Visitor Centre close by, which gives you an insight into the veterinary work of the charity. I've included a link below which will show you what Landwade's Hall itself is like. And that's it, folks. From here, all that was left to do was drive towards Newmarket along the B1506 past the main entrance to Molton Paddocks. It would have been ace to film that, but sometimes these things have to be done pictorially. Can't wait to come back for more. Stick around, there'll be more West Suffolk on your screens very soon. Thanks for watching this video, folks. Don't forget to like this episode if you haven't already. It really makes a difference with YouTube. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us a share too if you've got friends who'd like it. You can find all the links to my social media accounts below, as well as my Buy Me a Coffee page where you can donate to the channel. Also, if you've enjoyed this episode, have a look at some more videos in this series. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.